Okay, it's 6 o'clock, and would like to welcome everybody to our regular meeting of September the 6th. And as always, we have the invocation and call on Vice Chair David Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those so inclined, please bow your heads in prayer. Wise and loving Father, thank you on behalf of all those gathered here today, as well as those watching online. Thank you for your abundant blessings. Thank you for the gift of life itself. Thank you for loving us from your gracious nature, despite our many flaws. As we assemble today, we humbly ask that you grant us wisdom to govern in these challenging times, a sense of the needs and welfare of the people, the capacity to work together in harmony where there is honest disagreement, and personal peace in our lives and joy in our tasks. In your holy name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item of business, Union County Heritage Festival Day Proclamation, September 17th, and I'm going to call on our county manager to handle this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you are aware, Union County Heritage Festival has been held for the last several years out at the Union County Ag Center. It's September 17th this year, and as we have done in the past, the Board of County Commissioners has been asked to adopt a resolution, or a proclamation, I should say, honoring that day and making everyone in the county aware that we will be celebrating Heritage Festival on September the 17th. And I know that we have, I believe, several individuals here with the Cooperative Extension and with the Heritage Festival, and I'd welcome any comments, or would you like to say a few words about it? Come to the podium. It's like we have some of our Cooperative Extension staff with us this evening.
Thank you for the proclamation. We appreciate it. We appreciate your support. We're excited about the Heritage Festival. We have more vendors and more activities this year than we've ever had before, so we are growing this festival. Last year we had over 1,200 people, I think, and we're hoping for even more this year. So we are growing this festival, and we think it brings people into and out to the Ag Center and see what's going on out there. You know, also as part of this, on that Saturday, the 4-H Expo will be going on. So people will have the opportunity to intermingle between 4-H and the Master Gardener Festival. So thank you for your time. Can I introduce the Master Gardeners I've got here tonight? I didn't tell you who I am, did I? I'm Debbie Dillion. I am the horticulture agent and the coordinator of the Master Gardener program here in Union County. And so I am a lifelong extension person. I've been working for extension for over 25 years. And when I was an undergraduate in college, nobody ever told me that extension was a job, but it has been a perfect fit for my career. I love working with horticulture and with the gardeners and with homeowners and the landscapers that I work with. So can I quickly introduce the Master Gardeners we've got here? Because they do the bulk of the work for this Heritage Festival.
Ma'am, let me tell you something. You can introduce them, have them come up, and then I've got a proclamation to present to y'all, and we'll get a picture.
Okay, all right. So Tina Sagartz is the committee chair for this group. She heads them up, and she does an awesome job. So Tina, we've got Susan Varley Ketchum and her husband Don are here tonight. Susan is an artist extraordinaire, so she's been a great addition to our group. We've got now Cindy Hunter and her husband, Bill. Cynthia is a retired school teacher, so she's been a great addition to our Master Gardener group because she has that teaching experience and enjoys working with kids. So this is our group for tonight, and I take credit for all the hard work they do, you know. These people, you know, many hands make light work, and they really do. So thank you for
All
recognizing
right,
us.
if you'll hold on just a minute, I'll make a motion to adopt the proclamation for Union County Heritage Festival Day, September 17th, 2022. All in favor?
Aye.
And if y'all all come around here.
Thank you. Okay, come around.
Y'all get on either side of it.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your support. We appreciate your
Oh,
support.
very welcome. Pleasure. Thank you for your service, man. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Volunteerism is the greatest thing in the world, and it pays huge dividends, just not in money. But thank you for all y'all do. Okay, we have nobody signed up for informal comments. We're going to have a public hearing on the FY 2024 5311 Administrative Non-Urbanized Area Formula Program Transportation Grant Application. And call on Ms. Teresa Torres.
Good evening. The first public hearing is for the FY 24-5311 grant. It is required by the FTA and NCDOT that anyone applying for transportation funds does a public hearing. This grant is for $248,000, of which 15%, $33,000, will be paid by local funds. If the state cannot cover their 5%, they will ask that the county cover that, which would be $49,000. Normally, they cover that 5%, but they want everybody to know that if it's not possible, that we would need to cover it. These funds will be used for administrative expenses, primarily associated with a portion of our budgetary salary and benefits for transportation staff.
Okay,
And then we have another public hearing on as well.
right, let me finish this one first. Do we have anybody here wanting to speak in the public hearing? Okay, if not, I will close the public hearing for the FY 2024-5311. Okay, the next public hearing we have is the FY 2019 5307 Urbanized Area Transportation Grant Application Amendment. And Teresa, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you. During a recent North Carolina DOT year-end review, they determined that $28,912 of a neighboring county's funding was available, and they offered it to Union County for operational costs for this grant. If you do not use the money, this was federal funded year 2017 funds. If you do not use those funds within 5 years, they're taken away from you, and that's why we have the opportunity to use them. And that is a 50-50 match as well. So local dollars, 50%.
Okay. Is there anybody here wanting to speak in the public hearing on that matter? If not, I will close the public hearing on the FY 2019-5307. Okay, we're going to go to staff recognition now. Going to call on Patrick Nyland.
Thank you, Chairman. It's my honor tonight to recognize one of our telecommunicators. Daniel Beetler is in the back of the room. Daniel, if you want to come up. Daniel was honored with Union County's Lifesaver Award for his potentially life-saving guidance to help a woman deliver a baby at home. On April 26, Beetler answered an emergency call in Union County's 911 center. Laura Rainey, who works with Union County Social Services, called. She was with her sister at the time, who was in labor at home. Daniel walked her through the delivery process, what care to take, and how to care for both the baby and the mother. These actions were potentially life-saving to both the baby and the mother, and we couldn't be prouder of Daniel. Beckham Cooper was born at home and then transported to the hospital. Daniel's been with us for about 3 years. He also serves as a board member for the Sandy Ridge Volunteer Fire Department. So if you please join me in congratulating Daniel for his heroic efforts. Daniel, I think we're going to get a picture. Susan and Caleb, you want to come up and get in the picture? You're here, so I'm going to call you after.
Okay, now move to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. What?
Do we have the transportation items in?
Are the transportation items on the? Okay. Okay. Next is the FY22 Short Water Line Extension Program. Applicant fee payment results. John Shutak. John, you drew the short straw. Who do we have drawing the short straw now?
Say, as you can tell, this is not Joan Schuster. No, as you all know, Miss Alina Young has been with us for a while. She was hired specifically to run the short line program, and she's going to be walking you through the FY22
Okay.
projects this evening.
Tell you like I told John, speak into the microphone because half of us can't hear.
Okay, will do. Is this all right?
That's good.
Okay. Like John said, my name is Alina Young, and I am the project manager over the Short Water Line Extension Program. And we're here this evening to get direction from the board on which, if not all, of the FY22 selected projects to move forward with on engineering, design, and construction. Just as a reminder, we had the payment application due date of July 7th, and prior to that date, we had notified applicants via letter, and then as it got closer to the due date, we started reaching out via telephone to all of the applicants just to remind them that the due date was approaching. So I'm just going to go over some of the statistics of the paid applicants and then get your direction. So here's some summary statistics. We had 10 projects that we had selected. You'll see it says 9 projects selected. One of the projects that consisted of only one applicant decided to install a well system on his property and therefore withdrew from the program. So that will remove that project from the list as he was the only applicant. We had 83 out of 105 applicants pay. And you'll see the total length of the projects went from 12.5 miles to 11.9. That was in the case of where maybe an applicant was more toward the end of the proposed project line and it decreased the length a little bit. The decreased number of total applicants did cause the cost per applicant to increase, but the overall total cost, you'll see at the bottom, decreased from $6.3 million to $6 million. Another thing we wanted to be sure to look at was to look at all of the projects and see, did the applicants that submitted well tests and had water quality issues, did they all pay their fees? Because that could have, big impact on their scoring. And what we found was all of the applicants that had water quality issues did pay their fees, I think minus maybe one applicant. So I think that shows how important those well tests are to the scoring and to the applicants themselves. So then when we were looking at rescoring all the projects, we found that the scores didn't change very much since all of these well issues were incorporated into their scores. So what we found were the same 10 projects would have still been the 10 that were selected through the process. So this is just a breakdown of the payment statistics of the paid versus unpaid applicants. Like I said, we had 83 out of 105 applicants pay, so that was a 79% paid percentage. You'll note that all of the percentages are over 50% for all of the projects, of course, minus the project that I mentioned where the applicant had installed his own well system on his property. This is just some statistics on the length and the cost. Like I mentioned earlier, we looked at all the projects to see if any of them changed, and they did decrease a little, which decreased the cost from $6.3 million estimated cost to a $6 million estimated cost. And this is just a map showing where all of the projects are located. You'll see the little orange dot there. That's the project where the applicant withdrew in the Winga area. But I still think we have pretty good coverage of the county with all of the projects that we've selected. And that's really all I've got other than to get a decision on which projects that we should move forward with and answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions, gentlemen? Well, I'll make a motion for us to approve this and let y'all move forward.
All right, sounds
All
good.
in favor, raise aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay.
All right, thank you for your time.
Okay, the next one is FY 2023 Short Water Line Extension Program, Well Water Testing Reimbursement Funding. Mr. Mann.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioner Rape and all the other commissioners for your time. We figured the only thing that could be better than one short line presentation this evening was two. So buy one, get one free. So as you recall, we made some changes to the program for this upcoming year back in June, and I'll go through the summary of that here in a minute. But there were a couple of items that needed some additional direction and approval from the board, and that's why we're circling back up with you guys tonight to run through those additional items for your input and approval. So just kind of in summary, what I'll be covering is the FY23 program summary to date. So that'll just be kind of where we currently stand based on what's already been approved and what we need additional direction on. We'll also look at the FY23 timeline options for receiving applications, because there's a couple of things that are various options on how we go about that process, and we would like some input from y'all on that. The next thing is the well testing reimbursement. So as part of the FY23 program, well testing will be required. And one of the items that was approved by the board in the summer was to do reimbursement for said well testing, but we didn't have the details for that at that time. So that will be one thing that we'll need additional approval from you all this evening. Then we've got some recommendations from a staff standpoint on what we've looked at and what we think the best path forward is. And then at the end, we'll request board action on these items. So in summary, kind of where things stand. So back on June 20th, that's where we kind of did a wrap-up of the FY22 program that we received applications for last fall, where we had gone through and done an analysis of the scoring to make some to suggest some recommended changes for your review and approval. So from that meeting, you did approve the recommended changes that we recommended based on what we learned from the first year of this new program. We also got your approval to require well testing. And then the third piece of the approval was for a reimbursement program for the well testing. But at that time, we didn't have details on said reimbursement. So basically, from that meeting, we were tasked as staff to come up with a timeline for the well testing and the application period, and also how the reimbursement costs would be handled. So looking at the options from a application period timeline standpoint, there are a multitude of ways that this could be looked at. These are the two primary options that we looked at for consideration. So going from the top, option one consists of requiring the well tests be submitted with their application, so that basically it's one complete package when they submit for the program, and that would have to be done by the stated deadline for the application period. Option number two, over on the right-hand side, would not require the actual test results to be submitted, but they would have to provide proof that they had requested the well testing and had paid for the well testing, so that we knew it was in process.
Are we still on planning on running that through environmental health?
Yes, sir. And,
Okay.
and I could talk a little bit more about that, I guess, when we get into the reimbursement. So stepping down from there, assuming that we're able to get the board's approval for the last details this evening, we would propose to look at a application start date of September 21st. The goal there being to have the application period in before Christmas. Just knowing the end of the year and Christmas time, a lot of folks get busy, so try to get that wrapped up beforehand so that somebody doesn't inadvertently miss the deadline. So if we require the well test results to be submitted with the application, we would recommend a 90-day application period to give some additional time for the folks to get their well test request in and their well test results back to include in their application. Because we found that one of the tests that we require that has to go to the state lab, typically several week turnaround period on that test. The other option is if we don't require the testing results with the application, then we would recommend shortening the application period to 60 days, because at that point, folks would just need to show that they have requested the test, that they're not, having to get the results in with their application. There would kind of be somewhat of a grace period after the application deadline for those test results to come in. So stepping down to the next row, the well testing results period. For option one, there wouldn't be that time frame because the results would have been submitted with the application. However, if we go with option two, where they only provide proof of requesting the test, then we would recommend an additional 60 days basically for those tests to come in because it can take several weeks to get those results. So if someone basically requested a well test on the last day of our application period, they could be 4 to 6 weeks out from actually getting the results back. So that's why we would need about 60 days to allow for that time. Once we've got all the information, we obviously have to review a lot of applications. I believe last year we received 350 individual applicants that totaled 124 projects. If we go with option one, where we're getting all of the information with the application, we can kind of shrink that application review period, because like last year, we were able to review a lot of the applicants as they came in because we had all the information necessary to do so. If we have to wait to get the test results as an option 2, there's a lot of things that kind of hang in the balance that we can't do until we get those test results. So we would estimate it would take some additional time after the application deadline to get the review completed. So then there at the bottom basically is just a summary of how many days we'd be looking at to run through the process from when the application period starts until when we have kind of finalized the results and would be ready to make a recommendation to the board for approval. So that's kind of what the timelines look like. Flipping to the next page, this is just basically a graphical summary of the timeline, assuming we would start here in a couple weeks in mid-September. I do want to note that basically this is just through finishing the review of all the applications. Following that, we've got to make a recommendation to the board, notify the selected applicants, and then there's a 90-day period for them to pay their fees to confirm their project. So I do want to make note of that. Here's just kind of a basic breakdown comparison of option 1 and option 2. So on the application window, as I noted, option 1 would be a little longer to give time to actually receive the well test results. On the application review, option 2 is longer because we wouldn't really be able to score applications as we receive them because we would have kind of incomplete information. We'd be having to potentially wait for the well test results so that we could complete those applications or the review of those applications. And then so therefore the overall duration for option 1, as you can see from the graphical representation at the top, is about 2 months shorter for us to be ready to make a recommendation to the board for the projects for the FY23 program. Any questions on that before I move forward?
Any questions, gentlemen? No.
All right. So then to the well testing that's being required. So we're requiring 2 separate panels to be run for each of the applications. One being a basic bacteria test, so that's testing for fecal coliform and E. coli. And then the second panel, which is the one that has to be sent off to the state lab in Raleigh, is an inorganic panel which consists of 19 different potential contaminants. The typical ones are arsenic, iron, lead, manganese, nitrate, so a lot of heavy metal type items. So that would be the 2 tests that we would require. There are some additional optional tests that folks could have run if they, their property is adjacent to an old gas station where they believe there may be some leaking fuel tanks, and they could do a test for that, that sort of thing. And they could earn points through the evaluation process for that. As far as testing goes, basically testing can be done through 2 different ways. Through the Environmental Health Department here at the county, folks can request the test to be done through the county, or they could have it done by a private lab. If as far as the county's capacity to do tests during the application period, 350 tests or 350 applicants would be about the max that the current staffing could handle over this 90-day application period. That's a big lift. Just for perspective, I think this past year, of the 350 applicants, we had maybe like 35 applicants that actually submitted well test results. So there would be some potential limitations there. So just something to be cognizant of from a staffing standpoint. As far as the well testing reimbursement, I think the proposed budget for that would be $100,000 that would be funded through the county's remaining Arpa funds. And then on the reimbursement options. So we looked at several different options, and there are a lot of other ways that it could be looked at, but we tried to break it down to bracket it with several basic options. So option 1, and I'll get into more detail on the next slide, would be to reimburse the selected applicants after their project was selected and they paid their cost share fee. And then options 2 and 3 would be to reimburse all applicants for their well test, regardless of whether their project was selected or not. And then the last thing I wanted to make note of in terms of the well testing is we do not have a requirement that well tests be current. So any test that they had done this year could be used in subsequent years should their project not be selected this go-round. So it's not something that they would have to be doing on an annual basis.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
go back to your slide on the reimbursement options.
Yes, sir.
Option 1, is that something we'll take a separate vote on which one we choose?
Yes, sir.
As opposed,
Yes, sir.
okay.
So, as I mentioned, we looked at 3 kind of bracketed options. There's a lot of options you could pursue in between these brackets, but we tried to kind of set the guardrail, so to speak, with the minimum scenario and a maximum scenario. A couple things that I want to make note of for the option where option 1, where just selected applicants would be reimbursed. The first several years could be funded through available Arpa funds, but after that, if we continued the reimbursement program after FY26, that money would have to come from another source. Most likely the general fund is well testing is not a function of the utility. Obviously, for options 2 and 3, where we're reimbursing everybody, they'd be reimbursed this go-round, and so most likely you wouldn't be looking at many well testing reimbursements in future years because folks could reuse those tests. What we looked at was kind of a comparison of on the reimbursement amount. If they do the well testing through the county, that's $200 for the 2 tests that were required. We also looked at what's a typical cost for a private outside lab to do the testing, and we've shown it here of not quite $1,100, and that's based on just a couple of quotes that we requested from a couple of local private labs. And then the other part of the bracket from a cost standpoint that we looked at would be the whether it's just the selected applicants versus all of the applicants. And we used the data from FY22, this past fall's application period, to look to see what those numbers come out to be. So if you look at the bottom on option 1, if you're only reimbursing the selected applicants at a maximum amount of $200, which is what the county charges for well testing, you'd be looking at not quite $17,000. And then worst case scenario, but probably not realistic, to be quite honest, would be if all the labs or all the well tests were done by a private lab and we fully reimburse all costs that folks had and didn't put a cap on that, that it was a direct reimbursement. As you can see here, that'd be $375,000. Most likely options 1 and 2 would be probably the range that you'd ultimately be looking at. The difference between options 2 and 3 is option 2 limits it to the $200 that the county charges, but reimburses all applicants. So again, just the point of this was to kind of just do a math exercise to kind of give y'all an indication of kind of what kind of costs we'd be looking at based on what option that was selected for reimbursement. So as far as staff recommendations, from a timeline standpoint, staff's recommendation would be to require the well testing results with the application, and there's several reasons for that. As you can see, through that process, you'd be looking at about 240 days from the time the application period starts until the deadline to pay the cost share, so that we can then move forward with the design and construction of the projects. The reasons for this option versus the option where folks can submit their well test results after the application period is overall it's a shorter duration. So we obviously know folks are eager to be able to connect to county water, and so this allows us to do it a little bit quicker than the option with folks submitting their well test after their application period. Another item is it simplifies the process for the public. They know that they have to submit everything together. They're not trying to keep track of, have I submitted my application? Have I gotten my well test results in? They know that it has to be a complete submittal. And this just gives a graphical representation of what that timeline would look like. So assuming we would start the application period here in a couple of weeks, we'd be looking at about mid-May when we would be able to confirm cost share payments and move forward with engineering and construction for the FY23 program.
Mr. Mann, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If I understand the logic in requiring test results, But if they go pay environmental help, then you're actually putting the pressure on them. You see what I'm saying?
No,
If
sir.
environmental health is doing the testing,
Yes, sir.
are they gonna be able to do, say, 350 tests?
Tracy, not to put you on the spot, but
We believe we do have the capacity to. We believe we do have the capacity to handle the 350 tests. Is your concern that we would receive all the requests at one time at the end?
I'm just saying that they have to have, they're saying they have to have the test results with the application. So that means they apply, or they get ready to apply, but then they've got to come to you and pay you. And so in that 90-day period, all that's got to happen. Do you see what I'm saying? And let's say 3 weeks off of the 90 days for sending it off and getting the results back. So now we're down to 69 days for that period, you know.
Sir.
At day 61, or 69, it's getting critical.
Right. So we, absolutely, and that's why we provided 2 different options. The difference here is what you're getting is you're giving people grace for not doing something in advance. So basically, you're rewarding someone for waiting for the last minute to do something.
But
That's
what I'm
okay. You can certainly do that.
No, I'm saying, I like the process, but can environmental health do 350 tests?
Well, so what the issue is going to be, how quickly do people apply? And so if they come in and apply for apply for their well test, if they don't have their results in time for the application period, then they can't submit an application. And that's the difference here. The difference is your application has to have all components to it if you go with option 1. So you can't submit an application and not have your results. So that puts it's incumbent upon those individuals to go to environmental health pretty quickly and apply for those tests, pay for those tests, and then, of course, get those results in hand. Yes, does that cause some potential flooding of their office with that? Absolutely. But Tracy's committed that she believes that they can get that done. But really about a max of 350 is about all they can handle.
Okay, well, that's fine, and that would be great that 350 would apply. Did we ever settle the article or the question about, do we reimburse them even if they don't get selected?
That's actually, next slide. I did want to mention, though, one other thing to follow up on what Brian said. If folks, unfortunately, were to miss the deadline and not get their well test results in time to submit this year, this is an annual program. They would be able to use those well test results next year. So it's not like all is lost because they missed the deadline. So I think our point in recommending this option is let's reward the folks that are on top of things, that are really being proactive and really want the water. And so that's why we made the recommendation that we did. But certainly, the board, it's your right to approve whatever option that you see fit. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Rushing.
And so, like, if I come in this year, put in my $200, I could get reimbursed next year if I was approved next year. Is there a way of making it where we'll only reimburse what our county health department, environmental health charges? Because, if somebody does go to a private vendor, and we say we're going to reimburse them too, I don't know that we should be reimbursing them at a higher rate than we do. Like, we could say you're responsible for anything above
Right.
this amount.
Yes, sir.
Is that figured into it?
Yes, sir. I was going to say, if I can jump to the next slide here. This is on the reimbursement. So staff's recommendation is to reimburse selected applicants only after they've paid their cost share. A big part of that is this is a waterline extension program, not a well testing program. And so, we want to help folks, but we also want to make sure that folks aren't abusing the system and basically getting a well test for free when they have no intention of actually connecting to the water system. Again, we would recommend limiting the reimbursement amount to $200, whether the well tests were done through the county at the $200 or they were done by a private outside lab that may be charged more than that. That amount would be capped at $200. And the reason for these is it better controls the reimbursement costs by only reimbursing selected applicants. For folks that aren't selected, they would be able to reuse those test results for future years, so they could potentially be reimbursed, Commissioner Russing, as you alluded to, the following year or 3 years down the road. Again, trying to simplify the process that, if you're selected, you get reimbursed. If you're not selected, then you reapply the next year. And again, as I noted, this is a waterline extension program, not a well testing program. Of course, we know a lot of contaminated wells out there. Not saying that well testing is bad, but from the utility standpoint, our point of emphasis is on waterline extensions. Any other questions on this recommendation?
Commissioner Rushing.
One thought on this, and I'm not even sure in my mind, I don't think it can be done, but if you have a cost share and you, instead of a reimbursement, you gave them the credit, but the problem is, I see with that is maybe going from environmental health to public works.
It's just cleaner for us from a financial
To just
record standpoint
write
to
them a check.
actually, it's just cleaner that way.
Yeah, because and again, what I'm thinking of is the widow lady that's like, well, I've already gave him $200, and when am I going to get that back? And, being able to credit it to that other fee might be more appealing, but again, the accounting of it, I don't think can be done. Thank you.
Okay.
And, hold on, there is one thing I do want to remind the board, and that's not in this, but it's so you're aware of what else we're working on. We've also identified some additional funds out of the Arpa funds for a well rehab program. That is not a short line extension program. That's a program where we actually will work with property owners on rehabbing their existing well. And it could be a treatment system. It may be that it's a new well. It's whatever that we could do based on the circumstances. And so there's some funding that, as part of the Arpa discussion, we'll be having that with you. So I want you to put in perspective that, yes, we're asking for this consideration on the short line program, but we have a secondary program where we can help people with wells, and there will be well testing results as part of that program that obviously they would not necessarily be responsible for, because this is a cost share program. So I did want you to be aware we are working on both ends, a short line water program and a well rehab program.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hales.
Brian, I'd ask then if the short line extension, if you have 350 and you come up and choose, they paid for the well tested, could that also be applied to your other program you're looking at? Because I'm all for well testing. Union County is known for high arsenic levels. I mean, getting that one of our leading well drillers here in the county. So, I know that the two tests.
Right.
County doesn't do either one of those. They send them both off, don't they?
Well, the bacteria one.
So the bacteriological analysis is done at our public health lab here.
Okay.
And the inorganic sample goes to the state lab in
I know mine came back and said, safe to drink, good and everything, and then the organic came back, and it was a different story.
And that's the one from the state.
Yep.
And so your question, and I think the point you're trying to make is, obviously, we're going to have a lot more applications, I suspect, than we can fund. And you're going to have to make choices on which of the projects you say are the ones that you would select. It would be our hope and our recommendation to those that are not selected that we steer them towards the well rehab program.
That's my point.
And certainly try to use those results from those well tests to help them with the well rehab program. It doesn't have to stop there. That would be our approach at that point.
Because I think we've got a significant problem in the county that, a lot of people don't know, my water tastes great. It's fine. Tastes great's one thing, but, it's sodium. I know I just had a well tested, and my came back and actually covered more than what you had listed on this program. I think it was 17 points. That, it was an eye-opener. I'd like to see more people take advantage of it. And $200 is cheap for that.
It is. It's a bargain.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just to pivot off of what Commissioner Helms is saying, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think there are strong public policy reasons to get well testing done, and I think I embrace the option one in terms of the application period and in terms of requiring the well testing up front. There's certainly folks that are loaded for bear, so to speak, and ready to proceed. But I think the public policy reason is profound enough in terms of well testing that I would support option two in the reimbursement recommendation. And, I agree, $200 is not a whole lot when you consider that, we're getting a lot of wells potentially tested out there. And that, I think that information is gold, frankly. And not just for, possible well rehabilitation projects, but, I think our public health officials would be, quite interested in that information. So I just, again, from a public policy standpoint, I think to the extent that we can encourage folks, incent folks to get their wells tested, I think that's a good thing.
Commissioner Williams, I support your option two. I think we should reimburse all tests, but what that's going to do
Up to
then,
200 would be, yeah.
I think what that's going to do is, really, they don't have to pay if they get selected, the ones that don't get selected are going to get reimbursed.
That's correct, and that's fine. We certainly understand. I mean, it is a policy directive, and it is about public health, and that's not an issue. You will have some individuals who will not get selected. They'll get reimbursed. If they wish to use those results and wait until next year to apply for Shortline, they can. If they want to go through the well rehab program, they can do that as well. Those results will be valuable for that. So it's really a philosophical decision, and when we understand that, we're happy to implement it.
I think it's the desire of this whole board to help as many people as we can, and identifying the problems with the wells is a huge step forward. Okay, you need a motion, don't you?
Yes, sir. If I can maybe go through a summary of the items that we will need action on. So the first item would be to set the application period. Our recommendation would be to start the application period on September 21st and conclude it on December 20th, and require the well testing be submitted with the application as part of a complete package. So that'd be item number one. Item number two would be the well reimbursement criteria. From I guess the discussion from the board would be to reimburse all folks that apply for the program that submit well test results, and to limit that to the $200 cost if they were to do it through the county, regardless of whether they maybe did an outside lab that costs more. We would cap that at the $200 amount had they gone through the county. And then the last item would be approval of the $100,000 in ARPA funds to fund the well testing reimbursement costs.
So, Mr. Long, we need three motions, right? Okay, Commissioner Rushton.
So the well reimbursement doesn't come at the time of being approved for the short line. It comes at the time of the test.
So again, I think at this point in time, if it's all applicants, then once the results are in hand, then we would just process the reimbursements. We would not wait to see who was selected or not, because it's really not relevant at that point in time. We would just reimburse all applicants. And then, of course, we would still bring back to the board the projects, the scoring, and then you would make a decision on how to move forward with the selected projects.
But it would be just the applicants that apply for a short line program. It would not be, Because, I mean, I've heard the number of 25,000 wells in the county.
It would only be 350 total is what we can process. So we would have to cap the number of applicants that come for the program at 350.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying we'll get that many, but we'd have to set that cap because that's really all we can process during that time frame.
Right.
Mr. Shutak looks like he's,
I just want to make one important clarification on the reimbursement. So, Brian, you stated at the time the results were received, we would process the reimbursement. And I want to clarify that that's after the close of the application period, once those are evaluated. So we have complete applications, we can then process the reimbursements. So I just wanted to make sure that that point was clear, that it wouldn't be at the time that they come in and talk to folks in environmental health.
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir.
I got to express my concern. If you reimburse all applicants, you may, like Commissioner Rushing said, with 25,000 wells, you might get thousands of applicants to get their well tested, and it dilute the people that are seriously trying to apply for the short line extension.
We certainly agree. However, we would have to cap the number of applicants at 350. Once we hit 350, we would not allow any additional applicants because we number one, can't process anymore, and then we're going to start bumping up against our budget number. So you're right, we have to set that limit at 350, and once we hit 350, there are no more applicants to the short line program. Again, I understand why the board wants to do this. That was one of our concerns for our option one of reimbursing only those selected. However, I get it. It is about information, about data. But that doesn't stop someone who says, I really just want to know what my well is and I'm not really intent on going through with the short line program. We're not going to know that till it's time. We have that today. We have people who applied, who went through the application process. They were selected. They did not pay their fees. We have that now. I suspect that will happen again. We'll just have to deal with those circumstances as they come up.
See, I'd rather require that the application, the people that are accepted, that get reimbursed, and maybe under the well program, have a similar piece that allows it. But my fear is that you're going to bump some people that legitimately need it just because of your 350 window.
We understand. It's the pleasure of the board, however you wish to move forward.
Thomas, I was just sitting here and thinking, one thing we probably need to add on, that nobody would get a well tested if they have county water available in front of their house. In other words, they're clearly just wanting to see, is the water good?
Yes, sir.
Folks, we got to make a decision here on how we're going to proceed with this. Yes, sir.
There's a way to work this out, and, you know, the concern you have, that 350 limit really can stick it to a lot of people. So if we could figure out some wording where it's done at the time of approval, like you don't get your reimbursement, and if you don't get approved. So maybe that prevents
Well, that's
some people.
kind of option one.
Yeah, that maybe keeps some people from coming in. Because I see the benefit of getting, I mean, you know, if we had $5 million to get every well tested in the county, that'd be fantastic, but you don't have the capabilities of testing that many wells. So if, yeah, if that's option one, is that you're paid back at the time of approval.
It would be at the time of your cost share. Basically, when the cost share payment deadline ends, we would take inventory of who actually paid their cost share fee to confirm their project.
Yeah.
And at that point, we would reimburse those folks for their well test costs. Because you could run into a situation where somebody was selected, but then they chose, for whatever reason, not to move forward as part of the program. Again, basically, they'd have no skin in the game, so to speak, and we'd still be reimbursing them.
What's our current policy on, and I apologize for asking this question, I shouldn't have to ask it, but it's been a long summer. What's our current policy on new homes with wells? They have to be tested, correct?
So the way that is approached is if it's a vacant lot that's going to be a new construction, they don't have a well, obviously, so they can't submit test results.
But they get tested at the time they dig their
So
well.
are you talking about the construction?
New construction.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. It's our opinion that per the building code standards that number one, they are tested, and the results do come back to the property owner at the time. And Tracy can correct me if I'm wrong. But those on new homes and new construction, there are well tests that are required, and those results are required to be submitted. Now, the problem is not always the end user gets those results because it goes to the owner, and sometimes the owner is the builder at the time. So
But did we do something prior to getting a CO?
we are working on that program. We will actually be reporting to the board when we will start a program of requiring those results to be in hand and the property owner to have those, and that those results actually will be potable water before a CO is issued. So we will be reporting that to the board in the very near future.
Well, Brian, let me tell you, you're already doing it.
Oh, well good.
Because the fact that I am in process of building a house, drill my well, I send it in, and they come back and said, bacteria-wise, you're in great shape. Arsenic, I'm not. And I was told that environmental health will not allow me to have a CO unless I've got mitigation to that piece, which I think is correct.
Right, I think our program is not officially underway at this point. We had to run everything through legal just to make sure.
You didn't tell me that.
Okay. Well, we knew you supported it, so that's okay. But I believe that we're just about to the point where we will actually make it mandatory, which is still at the voluntary stage.
I think that's a good thing.
Yes,
But
sir.
those folks won't be reimbursed. We're not reimbursed. That's
No,
just
sir, they would
short
not.
line extension.
They would not be.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful that we don't have a rush of people that just want their well tested, and that, so we can figure this out. It's option one, or, because I like option two as well. That's what I was supporting up until thinking about the 350 limit and the cap.
And this is what every year, I think, and Thomas will tell you this, we learn new things about the program every year. I don't think there's anything wrong with the board saying, let's try this year. Let's try the reimbursement of all applicants this year. We'll learn after it's done whether or not these folks were really intent on the program or really just wanted to get their well tested. And yeah, we may find that we did have a bunch of people who really just wanted their well test, or we might find that it really was. They really wanted the Shoreline program. I think if you're interested in the results and the data, let's try it. Let's see what it comes out to be, and next year we may modify it, and we may make it that, no, we're only going to reimburse those folks who get selected, or it might be great. We might find that it's working.
Well, what I see in this is an ongoing program that, let's say that I'm thinking about it, and I'm talking to my neighbors about it. Well, it might be June, July, August. When does the filing open up? September?
September 21st.
So I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to my neighbors and saying, would you like to do this? Let's get our well tested in August. And it don't matter when I get my well tested, it's done
That's correct.
forever.
That's correct.
And so we could tell the people that are thinking about it but not got all their P's and Q's.
You can do it
not
now.
Got everything ready. Do it in August when we're not so busy. Because in May or March or April, our people are swamped, and with people that are really needing to get it this year or get it going this year.
Sure.
So again, option one would probably work, and option two might work if you have somebody that just is coming in and saying, I'm thinking about it, or I'm trying to talk my neighbors into it.
Sure.
Just say, well, then come back and apply later.
It's really it's whatever the philosophy is, the board, we can do it either way.
Would it be easier to do option one the first year and then go to option two? Or
Well, I
would it
think
be
we-
easier to go to option two and then
Option one, I think, and Tom, I'm doing all the talk, I'm talking here, Thomas can certainly chime in
Feel
anytime he
free.
wants to. So option one, I think, is an easier way for us to manage the program. And we're always looking for more efficient ways to manage the program. But it doesn't mean we can't do it the other way. It's just easier for us to manage. It's more efficient. I think if you try to do it this year, in my opinion, with only reimbursing those that are selected, then you're really not seeing whether or not, if you open it up the next year to everyone, you really don't have that data. I think what you're looking for now is, are people really committed to the short line program, or are they just committed to getting their wells tested? And we won't know that until we go through a process. So it's kind of chicken or the egg, or either or, is whichever one you want.
Could you flip it back to the screen where you're listing the 3 different options for the reimbursement? Now, what was the total number of applicants we had in the last iteration of this?
Yes. So for FY22, which is kind of the data we used this last iteration, we had 350 total applicants.
Total applicants?
Yes, sir. And then option 1 showed that we ended up, as Alina presented a few minutes ago, with 83 applicants that ultimately paid their cost share fees and chose to move forward with the program. So yeah, the numbers you see at the bottom are based on what we observed this past year.
I mean, I know it's always difficult, especially where you're talking about, changing something, a factor in this, and, what's the dynamic result in terms of the outcome. But ultimately, in order to get reimbursed, you still have to be an applicant. I mean, that's a distinction with a difference, at least to me. I mean, might there be a rush of applications just so somebody could get a, $200 well test? I would I would doubt that, but I mean, we're kind of figuring this out and learning as we go along as new data comes in. So I'm most comfortable with option 2, but that's why we have these votes.
Well, let me say something about that. If their well test comes back and it's fine, they're not going to tap on to county water. So they just save the cheapest.
Sometimes. You have some folks who, even if they say, there's nothing wrong with my well, they like the convenience of having county water. They don't have to worry about a well pump going out. They don't have to worry about the power going out, things that prevent them from having water when they're relying on their personal well. So you have some folks that would connect regardless, and they probably keep the well for irrigation purposes.
Well, I guess to finish my thinking, if they apply and their water's great, they don't get a reimbursement unless they apply and are selected to go on county water. Do you follow me there?
Okay. I follow you, but I think you're complicating the process. It's like either we reimburse folks or we don't. Or we reimburse a small pool of folks. You're complicating it, in my opinion. It's like I understand what you're getting at, but.
Well, I think it complicated it when we're scared that 20,000 people's going to come in here. And
we just don't know. And that's why we want to make sure that of the 350 people, applicants, that we really have people interested in being part of the Shoreline program. I get it. We're okay with saying it's 350 and let everybody get reimbursed. But for us to try and track, did you have good rail results, not have good rail results? Do you really want to be part of the program or not be part of the program? That just makes it more complicated. I think we reimburse all applicants up to 350, or we reimburse only those applicants that are selected. I think those are the easiest choices for us to manage.
Okay, Thomas, go to that last page. We're going to have to start chopping trees here, and the first one we're going to chop is, I make a motion to adopt funding FY23 short water line program well testing reimbursement with $100,000 of Arpa funds. All in favor?
Now, excuse me, isn't that different?
We're going to move $100,000 over
Okay.
to be available to reimburse the people that apply and follow through.
You're
Is that
starting
not
with,
right,
you're starting
Brian?
with the bottom one here.
Yeah, huh?
You're starting with,
The bottom one.
right.
and then we'll discuss how, option one, option two. The first thing we gotta do is fund it.
Okay, all right.
Brian, isn't that right? None of this happens unless we move 100,000.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely correct. Money is important.
Okay, we got a motion to move 100,000 to the well testing reimbursement, which we have not decided how we're gonna do that yet. We're gonna discuss that in a little bit. All in favor of moving 100,000, raise your hand, aye.
Aye.
Okay, we've got the money. Now, I'm open to discussion. I like what Commissioner Williams said, but to move on, I hear what Commissioner Rushing and Commissioner Helms is saying. If right now, if we go with only option one, that'll move that ball forward, right?
Can I make a recommendation? The very top one is a pretty easy lift. That's approved the time period and that applications must have the well test results. That's a pretty easy one to get out of the way.
Okay. All right, I'll make a motion to adopt FY '23 short line program recommended timeline. Application period September 21st through December 20th, 2022. Well testing will be due with the application. All in favor?
Aye.
I might point out, I didn't make it complicated.
Yes, sir, I understand.
All right. Now, gentlemen, let's discuss which option we want to go with. I can see the wisdom with going with one right now. Commissioner?
I will make a motion that we accept option one and address the payback of well testing in another vote.
Okay. Not tonight.
No, tonight.
Okay.
But this allows us to set that timeline so it comes back in May.
Okay.
At least that's what your chart shows.
No, I think, can you go back to that? So option one is
I may have created some confusion because we presented both
Two
as
different-
it's two different things. They're not tied, but they were both labeled option one. They're not tied together. So I would say with the previous motion that Commissioner Rape made and was voted on unanimously, that set the timeline period. So now it's just about the reimbursement, which I should have labeled them differently, I guess, so that it wasn't confusion that they were tied together. So the well reimbursement option 1, 2, and 3 in no way, shape, or form are tied to the option 1 and option 2 for the timeline, if that
But you
makes sense.
had from start to finish, you had a chart that showed the red period took you out to May.
Yes, sir.
With option one.
Yes, sir. And
and you just voted on that one. The
Okay, that was considered that.
Commissioner Rape actually
Yes, sir.
asked, that was the one he just had you vote
Okay.
on. Yes, sir.
The,
Commissioner Rushing.
the way I see this kind of working is that and this is how it used to work with our self-help program, is that I'm the ramrod. I'm the guy who don't like my well water. I'm the guy on the road that wants the water the worst. And I get my well tested for $200, and it comes back with arsenic in it. So I start going to my neighbors. Would you like to participate in the short line extension program? If you do, my well tested for arsenic, you need to probably you're going to have your well tested too. It's going to cost us some money, but we need to get an application in September to December. We've got to go through this process. So we need to get our wells tested. And I get 10 of my neighbors together. Everybody's got to get a well tested. If we're approved, we get our $200 back. If we're not approved,
That is option one.
if we're not approved, we don't get our money back. But if we're approved 3 years from now,
You could give your reimbursement.
we get our reimbursement back. If we're approved 5 years from now, we get a reimbursement. But we just don't get it until we're approved for the program. I see selling that. I mean, I think that could be sold to the neighbors, and it starts getting people up front of, well, I'm not going to give $200. Well, if you ain't going to give $200, you're not going to give $1,000. You're not going to give $1,000, you don't want water. So it starts making that project, the ramrod, the guy, pushing it, he learns real quick who's serious about it or not, and it may not even come to the county. But that's the way, again, I'm thinking of Mr. Davis years ago trying to push this for his road, and how he worked hard to get it done, and the church and all the other people that went in with it. And I can see that being a carrot, and I can also see that being seriousness gauge of that if we're approved, we'll get the $200 back.
Yes, sir. And to speak to that, this past year, the projects that were ultimately selected, that's basically what happened. The folks that had somebody as a point person going around encouraging well tests, getting their neighbors to sign up, those were ultimately the projects that scored the highest.
Yes.
A lot of the other projects where folks just didn't really put a lot of effort in, just filled out an application, the scores, I think, reflected that the folks that weren't serious about it didn't have very high scores. And the ones that were the ones that the cream rose to the top, so to speak.
And I think that answers Commissioner Helm's question. I know you and I, we've dealt with this a long time and talked about it, but in the past, I think that the seriousness of it, how serious are you before you go and apply? And if one guy goes and applies for his whole road, if nobody else wants it, you know, do the people on the road who eventually hook on, do they have to go through a well test and a?
And that's the key to keep in mind. I was actually going to mention that is when we process an application, it's only for those individuals who actually participate in the application. You could have 30 people on one road and only 10 actually participate in the application. The other 20, they're not paying a cost share, they're not participating. Of course, if it gets selected, they benefit. The water gets run by those properties. If they wish to tap on in the future, there's no well testing results required from us by that time. It just is the symptom of the way the process works. They get a benefit, they get to ride on the coattails of those who put hard work into it, but that's okay. I mean, it's about getting water to people who have poor water quality, so.
Commissioner Rushing, you want to make that motion?
I think you got a motion on the table already.
Which one?
Because I made a motion to accept option one.
Okay, all right, my mistake. So we need to incorporate that into adopt the FY '23 short water line program recommended well tasting reimbursement criteria using option 1, correct?
Yes, sir. And actually what's shown on the screen is is option 1, and that is selected applicants after cost share payment and reimbursement of a maximum of $200. That is technically option 1.
Okay. We have a motion. I just read it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
3-2.
That's all I need from you gentlemen this evening. Thank you all.
I guess if we're moving the railroad car forward, we're making progress. Commissioner Simpson, if you would speak sometimes, I wanted to go with option 2, but I didn't know where you were at.
While all 5 of us are sitting up here, everyone votes independently and you get a result.
Okay. Presentation and direction regarding potential abolition of the Union County Water and Sewer District. Jason Kay.
Commissioners, this evening you have in front of you, getting ready to see a presentation about what might be involved if we wanted to abolish the water and sewer district that we currently have. You all are aware, obviously, that we operate in a framework where we have a district and then the county as separate entities. Both of those entities are headed, of course, by the same group of people, but there are additional steps administratively, financially, and legally that need to be taken every time there's an action proposed. So back in I believe April 25th, please don't hold me to the date on the meeting, you asked for the legal group to research and come back to you with a set of steps and timeline if you all were to consider abolishing the water and sewer district. So this evening, that's what you have in front of you, and at the conclusion of that presentation, we would ask if you all would be willing to provide direction about whether or not to go forward with that. This evening's presentation is going to be done by Ben Isley, who's one of our senior staff attorneys and who has primary responsibility for handling Union County water legal questions. He's looked into this in depth and is going to talk with you this evening about what the future may hold if you decide to go in that direction.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. As Jason mentioned, I'm going to sort of follow up from the April 25th. He had the date right regarding the board directing staff to perform additional research concerning abolition of the district. So we've done so, and now we're bringing this presentation to you. First, I think it might be helpful to have a little bit of a refresher regarding the history of the district. It was established and created by Board of Commissioner resolution back in January of 2017. It's important to note the district is a separate legal entity from Union County. It is its own municipal corporation. It has its own governing board, even though by statute that governing board is the Board of Commissioners, though it goes by the name of the Board of Governors in our case. Additionally, the district entered into an interlocal agreement with the county, pursuant to which the district does a couple of things. One, it operates the water and sewer system owned by the county, and it also establishes the rates, fees, charges, and penalties for use of that system. And as you're well aware, the district has that authority, but then it's also subject to county's approval, specifically this board's approval of those rates and fees. So if we're going to consider abolition of the district, it's important to consider why was the district initially created and has its purpose run its course or been achieved? So the answer to that question is really fee authority. The story really goes back to August of 2016. In August of 2016, in a case entitled Quality Built Homes versus the Town of Carthage, the North Carolina Supreme Court held that certain governmental entities could not charge for water services or sewer services to be furnished. That is non-contemporaneous use of the services, future use of the utility. It found that cities, and by analogy because counties had the same statutory authority, and counties did not have the authority to charge for those future services. But other entities, which did have the to be furnished statutory language, did have that authority. One of those entities being a county water and sewer district. Subsequent to that Carthage case in the fall of 2016, Union County was sued by a number of developers who paid Union County's required what we call capacity fees, alleging that those were charged for services to be furnished. Thus, in that January of that next year, the Union County Water and Sewer District was created, which had that to be furnished fee setting authority. And so that's what happened in January of 2017. And now it's important to also consider what's happened with fee authority for local governments related to charging for water sewer services since that time. Union County was far from the only local government entity in North Carolina sued related to charging capacity fees, impact fees, similar fees that went by a number of names throughout the state. It was a major issue for both local governments and for developers, and thus ultimately the General Assembly stepped in their next legislative section in July of 2017. And they prescribed how both a county water sewer district, along with most other local government entities that provide water sewer services, may charge for certain capital services to be furnished. That's through system development fees, or SDFs, as we commonly call them now. So now both the district and the county have prescribed authority for charging system development fees, services to be furnished. So it's really somewhat redundant now that both the district adopts rates and fees and the county approves those rates and fees when they both have the same authority from a legal perspective to charge those rates and fees. So that's sort of from the legal perspective how the function and authority for fee setting has changed over the last several years. Additional considerations for abolition of the district are also some operational and staff considerations. As this board, I think, well knows, adoption of rates and fees now requires two separate board meetings and actions. You have to meet, the Board of Governors has to meet and take action to adopt rate and fees. Then right after that, you have to meet as the Board of Commissioners, come behind the Board of Governors and approve those rates and fees pursuant to the interlocal agreement. Additionally, the Board of Governors has to hold additional meetings that the county does not have to hold because, as I mentioned earlier, it's its own municipal corporation, has to adopt its own budget, conduct budget hearings, et cetera. And also from the staff perspective, there's additional accounting necessary to facilitate the interlocal agreement and operations between the district, especially on the financial side, how the money moves back and forth between those two entities. So really the bottom line is district abolition potentially really simplifies operation of the water and sewer system. So that's sort of the rationale for why we're bringing this action to you today. We want to sort of highlight certain actions that will need to be taken to abolish and then unwind the district. Listed them here. I'll go into them more on the following slides in a little more detail. First, related to the statutory process, it's actually a fairly simple, straightforward process to abolish a district from a pure statutory perspective. The Board of Commissioners notices and holds a hearing concerning abolition of the district, and then it can, at any point in time after that hearing, it can choose to adopt a resolution abolishing the district as long as it makes two findings. One, there's no longer a need for a district, and two, there's no outstanding bonds or notes issued to finance projects in the district. And our finance department has confirmed that is the case for the Union County Water and Sewer District, that we can make that finding. It's important to note related to timing that any action abolishing the district would only be effective at the end of a fiscal year following adoption. Thus, if we started this process now, the earliest that the district would be abolished would be effective July 1, 2023 for the new fiscal year. And then from an administrative perspective, staff files that adopted resolution with the Secretary of State's office. So that's really from a pure statutory perspective, all you have to do to abolish the district. However, it's not quite that simple given the duties that the district has, particularly related to the interlocal agreement. So in order to sort of unwind the district, the board would really need to take several additional actions. One would be termination of the interlocal agreement between the county and the district. That agreement is terminable at will by the act of either board, and that agreement actually specifically contemplates the act of abolition of the district terminating that agreement. And the agreement does note that real and personal property rights, if any, of the district revert to the county upon its abolition. Another action that the board would have to take related to abolition of the district is revision of the Union County Code, particularly those ordinances related to Union County water. Those include the water use ordinance, sewer use ordinance, the recently adopted cross-connection control ordinance, and the water sewer extension ordinance, which also includes those provisions related to the short line program, which we were talking about earlier this evening. Pursuant to the interlocal agreement between the county and the district performs certain actions to operate the water sewer system, and those are codified in the code. So it'd be necessary to remove those references to the district and return those assigned duties back to the county. Another action the board would have to take would be regarding water sewer rate and fee adoption. As I mentioned earlier, and as you well know, currently adoption is done by the district, only subject to approval by the Board of Commissioners pursuant to interlocal agreement. The Board of Commissioners would need to adopt water sewer rates and fees under its own authority. It could use the existing rate and fee structure if it so chose. It wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily, but that would be an action that needs to be taken. And then finally, related to system development fees, the board would have to adopt system development fees under its own authority. The district performed a system development fee analysis and adopted system development fees back in 2018 with that action effective July 1, 2018. The statute tells us that we need to update the analysis and system development fees every 5 years. So that process has already started to begin with a goal date anyway of July 1, 2023 to begin the new system development fees. So rather than the district going through that process, it would be the county going through that process with a goal date of July 1, 2023 being the new date by which the county adopts those system development fees. So those are the main actions that the board would have to take. Just sort of a high-level review of the order that those actions would have to be done. First would be the action we're requesting tonight, which is really just board direction to commence the process Next, the board would adopt a resolution abolishing the district effective July 1, 2023. And then it would subsequently take those unwinding actions that I just highlighted for abolition effective July 1, 2023. And staff would perform necessary related administrative actions. And so that brings us to the action requested, and staff's recommendation would be to abolish the district effective July 1, 2023. So the action requested would be direct staff to commence the process for abolition of the Union County Water and Sewer District effective July 1, 2023. I will note that this action is only staff direction. There'd be additional board actions that would need to be taken to actually officially abolish the district, that resolution, as well as the additional unwinding actions. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This doesn't open us up then to any legal action that anybody's paid any system development fees in the time period that we had the Board of Governors. Prior to the Board of Governors, we've checked all that. No legal, no ability to be, anybody can sue you for anything, but we're on solid ground as far as the money we've collected.
Sure. I mean, we could get into more detail in closed session if we need to, but I think I would say, we're recommending this action, and we've taken a good look in terms of that authority and the sound legal footing that we'd be on taking this action related specifically to fee setting.
Yeah, because I definitely see the benefit of not having the two boards or having the two meetings and just redundancies to that. But the other, there was something in one of the slides, I'm trying to remember what it was. The other, so it said something about loans or bonds. We haven't done anything as the Board of Governors that would be endangered in that?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I believe Beverly could confirm that.
So the interlocal agreement that was entered into between the district and the county stated that the county would maintain all of the outstanding debt and issue bonds based on our bond trust indenture that we have in place with U.S. Bank. We didn't change any of that when we created the district.
So the Board of Governors never took any
Correct.
bonds out, the Board of County Commissioners did?
That's correct.
I got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just follow up with Beverly on that. So notes and bonds are issued through the county, the revenue bonds. But what about like other short-term what about encumbrances? I'm also thinking about like short-term assets or investments or receivables. Is there a process there for?
Sorry, the interlocal agreement also addressed the assets of the district, that any assets would belong to the county. So none of the fixed assets were ever into the district's name. None of the investments were in the district's name. The receivables maintained are on the county's financial reports as well as county receivables.
So it sounds like the accounting is a bear, I understand, right now.
Yes.
But in terms of actually unwinding the financial piece, it doesn't sound like it's difficult.
No. It
Okay.
will make our life easier.
All right,
actually.
great. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just add that really the district it does enter into the extension agreements pursuant to the extension ordinance. However, those would be assigned to the county.
Thank you.
Okay, I will make a motion to direct staff to commence the process for abolition of the Union County Water and Sewer District effective July 1, 2023. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, quarterly capital projects report. Ms. Lyles. Fresh in from Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Good evening, Commissioners. As you recall, at one of your May workshops, you were presented the first quarterly capital report for the quarter ending March 2022. And this report that you're receiving tonight is the second quarterly report that we have produced. The reason behind this effort is that this report serves as a transparency document to our citizens, elected officials, management team, and staff on the progress of our major capital improvement projects that have been funded. And despite our budget challenges and what I consider are limited resources that are available to us, this report provides openness and transparency of our capital projects, and is crucial to build confidence in our community that we do what we say we're doing with our major capital projects and funding sources that are available. As a reminder, this is a quarterly report for June 30th, 2022. However, this is our unaudited July 20th, 2022 actuals. We are still working through closing out the fiscal year, and actually if we receive any invoices with a June service date, we are still accruing those back to the last year. So this may not reflect our total actuals that will be audited and presented in our financial statements once we complete our year-end closure. One change in this report from the prior quarter's report, we have added in a summary of changes in budget appropriations from the prior quarter. That way you as a board can see the major changes from one quarter over the other and any actions that you have taken. As a reminder, this report contains a program summary for each fund as well as a project summary sheet for each fund. The funds that we include in this are all 4 of our CIP funds that you adopt. And those are our General Capital Project Fund, our Union County Water Fund, our Solid Waste Fund, and also the funding that we provide for Union County Public Schools capital improvement plan projects. As you can see, the changes in the budget appropriation from the prior quarter, there was not a lot of activity during this time frame. And the reason for that is we were working on the next year's budget adoption. And so once you receive next quarterly report, you will see a lot of changes based on the actions that you took as a board adopting capital project ordinances for funding for fiscal year 23. This is the program summary for the general fund CIP. As you can see, our revised budget to date is around $220 million. Of that, we have expended $147 million, and remaining encumbrances of around $14 million are outstanding at June 30th. Available budget is around $58 million. And just to point out, a lot of the available budget that is remaining is for projects that are bond funded with the 2/3 general bonds that we issued this past year that are still underway. This is the project summary for the general CIP fund. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I will move to the major funds. These are the major capital projects that we have chosen. If you recall from the prior report, we take the major capital projects and we do an individual sheet for each one of these. As an example, the Board of Elections renovation, we have a photograph of the process of the progress that's being made on this facility, as well as a scope of the project. This tells you what phase the project is in, the appropriation amount for budget, what has been expended, and it also gives you the activity timeline of when they are expected to complete construction. I did not plan to go through each one of these major projects individually, or I would be up here a long time tonight. So if there's any projects you have a question about, I'll be glad to address those for the General Capital Project Fund.
Okay, no questions? Thank you very much, Beverly.
Okay, and one thing I'd like to add, the next quarter report will be for quarter ending September 30th, 2022. And you as a board adopted some language in your budget ordinance that requires Union County Public Schools to provide a detailed report at that time. That will be the first report we receive from them, and we will present you that report, and then that will be the last report presented. And then going forward, this report will be presented as information only. But as requested, this report is going to be public facing on our website for anyone to see. Thank you.
All right, our next project, Arpa funding recommendations. Michelle Lancaster, Deputy Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a brief presentation for you. On some new ARPA funding recommendations as we're trying to continue to move our use of ARPA funding forward. Just some highlights and some recent development notes. Just a reminder that we've received $46.6 million from the U.S. Treasury. And as you all know, the guidance has continued to improve over the last several months. And some of the changes in that guidance regarding the final rule and the compliance and reporting requirements are noted here. Specifically, we are allowed to use a revenue replacement of up to $10 million for reimbursement of salaries and benefits. Additionally, we are allowed to restore public sector capacity through reimbursement of salaries and benefits for unfilled positions. The last thing that I wanted to note here is that broadband projects, as you all know, we asked for some additional capacity and funding for those projects. Those grants, as they are being released, are going much slower than we had anticipated. So you'll see one of the recommendations is to change that amount some, and I'll explain more about why we think that makes sense at this point. Additionally, I would just remind everyone, I think everybody remembers this, but just to make sure that those watching remember, we need to allocate these funds by the end of 2024 and spend them by the end of 2026. So we're still working on some timing to make sure we get these dollars spent. So tonight, the funding recommendation that we are making is to do a couple things. We are able to fund additional projects through the revenue replacement and restoring of public sector capacity, and we'd like to do three things. The first is to pay off some UCPS callable bonded debt by using $10 million that we would be freeing up by replacing county dollars with Arpa funds in this reimbursement replacement revenue replacement scenario. What this would essentially do is allow us to not have to see a tax rate increase that we had anticipated if the school bonds are approved in November. It would alleviate 1.77 pennies of the anticipated 13.64 total pennies is what we had anticipated. It would move that number to 11.87. So again, it would alleviate 1.77 cents if we paid off this debt. We are also recommending $4.9 million to finish the aseptic training facility project for SPCC. I think you're all aware of that project. And then we are also recommending $1.7 million for farmers market safety upgrades. This would allow us to use the farmers market more frequently. There have been some questions about the enclosing of that structure, that staff would make sure that they had done due diligence and before we moved forward with that project. So are there any questions about those three recommendations before I move forward? Okay. With ARPA dollars, what we are recommending is moving $10 million into additional funding for the Yadkin project, and this is essentially to continue funding of the parallel distribution lines in the east. So to add this to the money we're receiving from the state and do any additional work that we can to have those parallel distribution lines in the eastern part of the state. And then you've got $300,000 for the well testing, which includes the $100,000 that you just took action on, and then the $200,000 for the well rehab project. And then we would be reducing the broadband money to $1.5 million, and we think that will give us adequate space for seeing additional homes receive broadband. And so essentially tonight we're asking you to approve moving forward with these projects, and if you do that, then there will be additional actions that have to come back to the board for each of those to move forward, CPOs and debt instruments that would need to be brought before you for action. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Michelle, if you'd elaborate a minute on the Yadkin project parallel distribution line, that's going to make water lines available for taps where that line is. Is that not correct?
Correct. And what I think you'll recall that you had done at a previous meeting was to use some state money that we're receiving, $35 million, to do parallel distribution. This would go toward that project, and anything additional would extend that line further to the east. Brian may want to add.
It's the 762 line that could conceivably be extended even farther to the south and to the east if necessary.
That's the one going to Wingate.
The original one is the one that goes to Wingate. There was a secondary extension that it went past that into more of the Jackson area. That one was not part of the original ask. But I think the way we look at it is if between the money from the state ARPA funds as well as these ARPA funds, if there's additional money, we would try to put it towards that project.
Okay.
And I would just remind the board that we also have the $35 million that we received from the state. You also, in this most recent budget, they had $1.75 million for water and sewer infrastructure that we would bring back for the Yadkin project as well. So we would just continue to add dollars to that part of the project.
Commissioner Rushing, that had originally been mentioned as $8 million, and it got cut down.
Yeah, and then a couple things with this. So the 3.5% penny impact, 3.5 penny impact.
Pennies would go down by
1.7.
1.77.
With the 10 million to the UCPS.
Right.
Still kind of wonder about the farmer's market.
So, yes, as we
you're gonna
talked
check
about
into that.
earlier, I think we appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and as Patrick and I mentioned earlier, staff will do due diligence on that. These would be using county dollars, so that would have to come back to you with additional work, and so we will have looked at that before we bring that project back. And if for some reason we can't do that, we'll bring that back to you and we'll make a different recommendation.
And for the other commissioners, Commissioner Simpson and I both talked about this, but maybe for the others, I don't know if you've heard about it. There was some concerns that the farmer's market was built on a previous landfill. We don't know if it's urban legend or truth, but there's a possibility of methane, and there's maybe some methane vents that come up into that. So enclosing that building has always been talked about being an issue because of the methane and coming up through and being a problem. So that's where the question came from that. And then the Yadkin line coming down to Wingate, that would include distribution that follows that main trunk line, the transmission line. You would also have the distribution line in with that as well.
So, yes, sir, what the board approved is for the transmission line as well as a distribution line to run parallel with that project from the plant to the Wingate area. Now, the extension down to the 762, that would not necessarily be a distribution line. That was not built into that. We would obviously have to discuss how that works. That would be potentially a transmission/distribution line. We didn't discuss that with the board previously. We're not sure how much of this money is going to be able to cover all of those projects.
So the way I understood it when we saw the picture and we talked about it is that the transmission, which just carries the water with no connections, goes to Wingate to the water tower.
That's correct.
But then below that, anything below that we had money left over to do, that would be distribution, is my understanding.
It's my understanding that could serve as transmission/distribution.
Yes. So like a 12-inch line instead of a 16-inch.
It would be a much smaller line, yes, sir.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Rushing insinuated that I swam in Lake Tonawanda, so I should know what's going on down there.
Lake Tonawanda was on the other side.
Jerry was dumping his trash in that landfill.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Michelle, could you talk a little bit more about this liberalizing of the new Treasury rules and specifically the $10 million kind of default?
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, I think default is really probably the best and simplest way to describe it. Essentially, any municipality or county that's receiving these ARPA funds from the Treasury has now been given the flexibility to use up to $10 million without showing any revenue loss, which originally, you might remember, was in the original language. So you just essentially, if you have 10 million or less, you can use those dollars. Since we had 46 million, we can use up to 10 million just to do whatever a general county government function would be to use those funds, and that's what we're recommending here.
Okay. So in other words, would it be fair to say that, when the new board gets sworn in December, they will have more flexibility in terms of managing county finances in the coming year. That it's an additional source of funds that can add to our flexible response.
I think that's fair, yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the ARPA funding recommendations as presented by staff. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we've got appointments to boards. There are 2 vacancies for regular members on the Region F Aging Advisory Committee. Liz Ann Mangum was appointed in June 2021 to serve as an alternate for a 1-year term on the Region F Aging Advisory Committee. Ms. Mangum is eligible to be appointed to serve as a regular member. The vacancy has been advertised in accordance with the Board of Commissioners' Rules of Procedure. Ms. Mangum has applied to serve in this position. No other applications have been received. I make a motion to appoint Ms. Lizine Mangan to the Region F Aging Advisory Committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and on the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, the JCPC, there is a vacancy on the JCPC for a person under 18. The position has been advertised in accordance with the Board of Commissioners' Rules of Procedure, and James Jacoby Byers has applied to fill this position. No other applications have been received. I make a motion to appoint James Jacoby Byers to the JCPC. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Manager.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Commissioner Helms.
No comments.
Vice Chairman Williams.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Simpson. Commissioner Rushing. I do want to welcome Brian Helms to a meeting. Good to see you, Brian. You'll probably be setting up here in a couple of months, so I'm sure you'll bring a lot of good ideas to the board. Beverly, I will tell you after our meeting with Vice Chairman Williams about the school situation and us deciding that they are fighting a hard battle. I contacted Senator Johnson, and I just got a text from him before our closed session that he has set everything in motion to try to get DPI to look at why they are paying for something that UCPS can't get to work. So I told him to call you and Shauna Collins and Michelle. Michelle said she needs to talk to him anyway. But if he calls you, that's what he's calling about, just trying to get details. And Stoney, I didn't get to tell you back there, but DPI bought time for UCPS and 5 other schools. 3 of them have dropped out. But Beverly and Blake went over there, and they couldn't get it to work like it's supposed to. Something about problems with the RAM or bandwidth. And I believe it was Michelle said they really need to reach out to the delegation. So as soon as I left that meeting, I called Todd. He called me back. So he said he's going to try to get something done. They're spending money, and we're really not getting a usable product for it. So with that being said, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.